They never choose the safest man. They choose what makes them feel, and sometimes what they feel is fear. Machiavelli would say that this is not irrationality, it is nature's strategy. Because deep down, love isn't about comfort, it's about power. And power in relationships always belongs to those who are capable of hurting, but don't. It is this tension that creates desire, the unpredictability, the risk, the silent mastery. The human heart yearns for the danger that promises transcendence. And that's why, unconsciously, she reaches out to the man who could destroy her, just to feel like she survived. A woman does not seek out a man who says, "I will never make you suffer." She seeks what awakens something she cannot control, what is strong enough to touch the wildest side of the soul and still remain calm. Machiavelli would call this virtue emotional mastery over oneself and over others. Politics, guided by reality, not ideals, shows that no one is passionate about balance, falls in love with the abyss. Because the abyss excites and emotion is addictive. She doesn't just want love, she wants impact. And the impact comes from the contrast between power and vulnerability, control and danger, calm and fire. It may be cruel to admit, but the man who tries to be completely secure becomes invisible. He is too predictable to be remembered. The woman may admire him, but she does not desire him, because desire is born from uncertainty, mystery, and the feeling that something could escape at any moment. Machiavelli would understand, love is a political game disguised as poetry. And whoever offers predictability offers boredom. This is why the good man is rarely chosen. He protects, but does not provoke. And the absence of provocation is the death of attraction. Ultimately, what she seeks is not suffering, it is intensity. The man who carries the fire, but knows when to put it out. What doesn't need to be shouted to impose presence. What is capable of hurting, but decides not to. This is true power, control over chaos. Machiavelli said that the wise prince rules without needing the sword, only by the perception that he could use it. In love, it's the same. The man who inspires respect before love awakens both. He who inspires only love loses both. That's why so many women say, "I don't know why I'm attracted to him." Because the unconscious knows what reason fears. He recognizes the strength, the danger, and the presence, and he surrenders, not by logic, but by instinct. Machiavelli would say, this is not weakness, it is emotional politics, the art of bowing to those who carry virtue. In the end, she doesn't want the man who promises not to hurt her. Want what you could do, but choose to love. And it is in this paradox that true attraction becomes inevitable. Most people believe they know why they choose someone. I like someone who makes me laugh. I prefer someone who understands me. I'm looking for someone sincere. But Machiavelli, if he were alive, would laugh at this self-deception. Because human beings, no matter how rational they imagine themselves to be, don't choose with their minds. They choose with their subconscious. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, reveals the same principle in relationships. The most intense decisions rarely rely on logical reasoning. The woman who claims to seek stability is often attracted to those who represent risk. The man who swears he wants tranquility is captivated by those who challenge him. These are invisible forces, primitive impulses that don't consult the intellect. The end justifies the means, and in this case, the end is to feel something that breaks the tedium of predictability. These unconscious criteria are like the backstage of the mind. They are emotional memories, traumas, inherited archetypes, everything that moves without asking permission. Machiavelli said that those who understand true human nature dominate the game, and that's exactly what happens here. While most people try to impress with words, the other person's unconscious is reading signs of power, dominance, and security. It's not the smile that charms, it's control disguised as calm. It's not excessive kindness that attracts, it's virtù, the ability to act firmly without asking for validation. True attraction is political. It arises from the perception of who, on the emotional board, is in control. A simple example: look at the series or movies that audiences adore. The most beloved characters are rarely the nicest ones. They're the ones with presence, purpose, and mystery. They represent constant adaptation. They mold themselves to the context without losing their essence. In the realm of love, the same thing happens. She may say she wants a sweet man, but she's moved by one who carries direction and intensity in his gaze. It's biological, psychological, and symbolic. The unconscious seeks someone who seems capable of protecting it, even if, paradoxically, it could hurt it. The conscious mind may deny it, but the body feels it. And it's at this point that the confusion between emotion, instinct, and choice arises. It's curious to note that while the modern world extols reasoning, the human brain remains at its core an emotional machine. Machiavelli would call this fortune, the invisible force that drives decisions long before logic arrives to justify them. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, also applies here. Biology doesn't ask permission to act. It simply fulfills its role, ensuring survival and reproduction. Therefore, when a woman feels attraction, it's rarely through speech, it's through energy, the timbre of the voice, the confidence, the command of space. Everything that awakens the limbic system, that ancient part of the brain that decides in seconds what the conscious mind will take years to understand. Emotion is the subconscious's most powerful filter. A gesture of reassurance can trigger deep memories of protection. A hesitant posture can trigger invisible alarms of distrust. Machiavelli would say that virtù, the ability to act with strategic intelligence, is what separates the common man from one who understands true human nature. The man who understands this game doesn't force, he awakens. He doesn't convince, he provokes sensations. Instead of worrying about appearing interesting, he works to be an emotionally striking presence. He's the kind of man who, when he enters a room, changes the air, not because he speaks loudly, but because his silence carries weight. And the most fascinating thing is that the female subconscious perceives this instantly. Even before the thought forms, the body has already reacted. The gaze holds, the heart races, the mind creates justifications for what has already been biologically decided. It's an internal theater between reason and instinct, where emotion always plays a leading role. This is why attraction doesn't obey coherence, it obeys chemistry, emotional history, and ancestral triggers. The subconscious mind is the true ruler of human relationships, and those who know how to manage it master the art of influence. And perhaps that's why Machiavelli said that, in love as in politics, whoever controls emotions controls power. Machiavelli always knew that power lies not with the strongest, but with those who best understand the human game. The end justifies the means was never about cruelty, but rather about strategy, about seeing beyond appearances. In the realm of attraction, this means understanding which feelings can be guided, as long as one understands what awakens them. The man who applies politics guided by reality, not ideals, realizes that brute honesty doesn't always win, and that mystery is often more persuasive than truth. The woman who feels curiosity, not clarity, remains mentally trapped. She's like a ruler who knows maintaining interest is more important than revealing the plan. These secret strategies are not tricks, but skills of perception and emotional control. Machiavelli would call this virtù, the practical wisdom of acting with both firmness and subtlety. The man who masters this art understands the calculated use of force. He knows when to approach and when to withdraw, when to show interest and when to let silence speak for him. Seduction, like politics, is a game of timing and gestures. Show too much of yourself and you lose your power. Hide completely and you lose your charm. The difference between the conqueror and the rejected is the ability to constantly adapt to real human nature without losing yourself in it. A simple example: the man who sends 20 messages in a row loses control of the game, not because the woman doesn't like attention, but because she unconsciously feels she's lost emotional power over him. On the other hand, the man who communicates calmly, who shows interest but without urgency, arouses curiosity and respect. He represents emotional security and therefore value. It's the same Machiavelli principle applied to diplomacy. Better to be feared than loved, as long as you don't become hated. In other words, it's the balance between presence and distance, warmth and coldness, emotion and calculation. And it's in this contrast that the difference between the common man and the silent strategist arises. Few realize that what a woman says and what she truly wants are often worlds apart, not because of falsehood, but by nature. Machiavelli would say that words are weapons of appearance, and that politics guided by reality requires seeing beyond the rhetoric. She may say she wants a sensitive man, but if she finds him insecure, she loses interest. She may claim to desire stability, but she feels alive only when faced with the unpredictable. It's not a contradiction, it's emotional biology. Her unconscious seeks the instinct for leadership, a firm presence, and silent dominance. The discourse is rational, but the desire is ancestral. That's why those who believe only in words lose the game before it even begins. The strategic man understands that deciphering intentions requires observing behaviors, not statements. Machiavelli taught that governing is understanding what people do, not what they say. In love, it's the same principle. She may praise the gentle man, but she emotionally surrenders to what represents power and direction. The appearance of virtue enchants the mind, but instinct seeks strength. And virtue here lies in balancing both, being good without appearing weak, being confident without appearing arrogant. The man who understands this duality is not confused by speech, because he knows that words are diplomacy and gestures are decree. Want a practical example? When a woman says, "I don't like playing games," what she really means is, "I don't like being manipulated, but I want to be emotionally challenged." The game itself isn't the problem is predictability, because predictability kills attraction. A man who reveals all his cards isn't trustworthy, he's boring. Machiavelli would call this a strategic error, opening the castle to someone who hasn't yet proven loyalty. The politics of desire are subtle. They require that mystery remain alive, that interest be measured, that emotional power never be given away for free. And those who understand this art begin to see what she says as a curtain and what she desires as truth. The truth is, even when they deny it, people are drawn to power. Machiavelli knew this more than anyone, and that's why his reality-driven politics sound so uncomfortable. He knew that deep down, no one loves the weak. Virtue is admired, but power is followed. In human relationships, the same thing happens. Women may respect kindness, but they only surrender emotionally to the presence of those who convey dominance. This has nothing to do with money or appearance, but with the symbolic energy a man carries. The end justifies the means, and here, the means is the invisible magnetism of someone who doesn't need to assert himself. He is the rock in the middle of the storm. And this, biologically, communicates security. Status, in turn, is not just social, it's psychological. A woman connects with a man who demonstrates inner value, one who, even in silence, behaves as if he knows who he is. Machiavelli would say that this is virtù applied to intimate life, self-mastery, the calculated use of emotional strength, leadership without arrogance. The man who constantly seeks to prove his worth loses the game because he abdicates the posture that would make him worthy of respect. Meanwhile, the man who acts in accordance with his nature, confident, adaptable, and upright, commands respect without needing to ask. He's the kind of man who, when he says little, everyone listens. But here's the crux. True power isn't what you impose, it's what you feel. A man can be rich and influential, but if a woman senses emotional submission, he instantly loses attraction. On the other hand, an ordinary but emotionally centered man becomes fascinating. He carries dominance in his gaze, calm in his gestures, and the silence of someone who doesn't fear being forgotten. It's the same principle Machiavelli taught princes: better to be feared than loved, as long as you don't become hated. In other words, to be admired for strength, not oppression. And it is precisely this balance between power and presence that transforms emotional play into art. Attraction isn't a choice, it's a response, and this simple truth shatters much of modern romantic illusion. Machiavelli would call this understanding real human nature, realizing that feelings don't follow logic, they follow stimuli. A woman doesn't fall in love because she decides to, she falls in love because something in her responds. It could be the tone of voice, the way he looks, his posture, the silence, the contrast between sweetness and firmness. These are emotional triggers, not arguments. And no matter how much culture tries to rationalize love, it remains an instinct disguised as poetry. The end justifies the means, and the means here is the emotional impact someone causes without needing to explain. The subconscious mind is fast, primitive, and relentless. In a fraction of a second, it decides whether there's attraction or not, and the rest is just excuses. That's why many men try to convince, explain, prove, and fail, because they're trying to conquer what was already decided long ago, in the body and in the emotions. Machiavelli would say it's like trying to negotiate with fortune, useless. Emotion doesn't obey logic, it responds to symbolic power. When a woman feels something intense, it doesn't matter if the man is the right one or the wrong one. What matters is what he awakens. That's why emotional control is more seductive than any appearance. It activates the instinct that says, "This man is rare." But want to see this in practice? Observe how the most intense relationships are born from small shocks. A look that lasts a second too long, a conversation that strays from the obvious, an unexpected gesture of trust. These moments are triggers, not plans. And that's exactly where attraction blossoms, in the imbalance between control and chaos. A woman doesn't get involved because she thinks, but because she feels. And a man who understands this stops relying on logic from emotion. He begins to act strategically, guided by reality, not ideals. Machiavelli would call this practical wisdom, the virtue of those who know how to provoke the right feeling at the right time. Most men don't miss opportunities for lack of beauty, money, or intelligence. They miss them for not understanding time. Machiavelli said that even the most powerful fail when they ignore fortune, the unpredictability of life. In the game of attraction, the same thing happens. There are times when silence is power, and others when movement is obligation, but the insecure man confuses both. He speaks when he should observe, and hesitates when he should act. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, shows that the realm of love is governed by rhythm, not speech. He who feels the moment conquers it. He who rationalizes it too much buries it. The error lies in excessive awareness. The man thinks too much before acting, and in the interim, emotion dies. He believes he needs more signs, more guarantees, more certainties, when in fact, the woman's unconscious has already made up its mind. Timing is everything, and those who arrive even a second late arrive as friends. Machiavelli taught that virtù consists in mastering chaos without trying to control it. Emotionally, this translates into active intuition, perceiving when she opens up, when she tests, when she retreats. The man who learns to read these micro-variations doesn't need luck, because he understands the invisible flow of seduction. Want to see how this happens? When she gives him a curious look and he pretends not to notice, he loses. When she provokes him and he responds logically, he loses. When she shows interest and he rushes to secure her, he loses. Because charm lies in tension, not immediate conquest. Machiavelli would say that haste is the enemy of power, and the same is true here. Seduction is the field where patience and precision are more valuable than speed. It's the mastery of pause, the calculated use of force, the interplay between presence and absence. And curiously, it's in this silent dance that the difference between the anxious man and the magnetic man is born. Most men still believe that attraction is a manual of fixed formulas. Be handsome, have money, dress well. But Machiavelli already warned, men are more deceived by appearances than by reality. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, shows that true charm lies not in external characteristics, but in the internal energy they project. Money can buy comfort, but never magnetism. Beauty attracts attention, but it doesn't sustain desire. What truly attracts is the symbolic power manifested in posture, in the look in one's eyes, and in the coherence between what a man says and what he does. Virtù, the inner strength that acts with conviction, is worth more than any apparent status. One of the biggest myths is that too much kindness wins. It doesn't win, it lulls. Machiavelli would say that he who wants to be loved by everyone ends up being respected by no one. A woman respects a man who knows how to set boundaries because this conveys value. She doesn't seek someone who obeys her, but someone who takes a stand. The difference between a servant and a leader is the degree of self-respect. When a man molds himself to please, he abdicates his virtù. He loses the brilliance that comes from authenticity. Kindness is powerful, as long as it is accompanied by firmness. It is the balance between an open heart and a strong hand that makes a man perceived as a presence, not an option. Another dangerous myth is that showing vulnerability always attracts. This isn't quite true. Vulnerability is beautiful when born of strength, not need. When a man shares his pain calmly and with poise, he conveys depth. When he does so, seeking pity or validation, he conveys weakness. Machiavelli would say, avoid being hated, but also don't seek to be loved at any cost. Power lies in showing yourself human without losing your bearings. The myth of perfection and the myth of submission are faces of the same error. Both deny emotional reality. Women feel what is authentic and what is theatrical. And this is where we enter even more dangerous territory, that of emotional manipulation and subtle control. Manipulation isn't necessarily deceiving. It's understanding how emotions work and using them strategically. Machiavelli never saw manipulation as villainy, but as a tool. He said, whoever wants to deceive will find someone willing to be deceived. And the same applies to emotional play. The woman isn't a helpless victim. She participates in the play as much as the man. Both manipulate, test, provoke, and observe. The difference is that the Machiavellian man does so consciously, guided by reality, not ideals. He understands that emotion is energy, and whoever controls energy controls the rhythm of the relationship. The secret is to influence without forcing, to lead without appearing to lead. Subtle control isn't imposed, it's insinuated. It's the calculated use of force. the emotional mastery that makes the other person go with the flow without realizing it. The man who masters this art doesn't need to raise his voice. He simply adjusts his tone. He doesn't demand attention. He simply creates presence. He's like a wise ruler. He commands without authoritarianism. He influences without violence. He commands respect through a balance between firmness and serenity. Machiavelli would call this virtue applied to seduction, the power to shape perceptions without needing to justify intentions. A woman senses this mastery and unconsciously trusts. Because emotional control awakens the instinct for security that modern chaos has extinguished. But there's a fine line between influence and toxic manipulation. A man who crosses this line loses respect, and with it, power. Machiavelli warned, "Avoid being hated." A ruler who abuses control becomes a prisoner of the fear he generates. The same applies here. Those who play to dominate lose their charm. Those who play to understand gain power. Subtle control isn't about trapping someone, but about freeing yourself from the need for approval. It's the emotional maturity of those who understand that strength lies in calm and influence in silence. And perhaps that's precisely why in the realm of seduction, everything boils down to power. The power to make someone feel without promising anything. Machiavelli would have understood modern love perfectly because he knew that behind every human relationship lies a silent struggle for power. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, shows that romance is merely the emotional face of diplomacy. Seduction, in this sense, is an arena where every gesture, silence, or word carries intention. A woman tests a man's emotional dominance as much as a prince tests the loyalty of his allies. Love is a game of perception, and those who don't understand the rules end up using their own emotions as currency. The end justifies the means, and in the realm of attraction, the means are subtle: presence, mystery, and self-control. In the social game, the winner isn't the prettiest, richest, or most intelligent. The winner is the one who understands the invisible dynamics. It's virtù in action, the ability to read others without losing sight of oneself. The man who masters this art doesn't seek approval. He arouses curiosity. He doesn't try to convince. He creates context. He's the architect of interactions, the strategist who understands that true power lies in being emotionally unshakable. He doesn't play to beat others, he plays to understand the game. And that's precisely why he's rare, because in a world where everyone wants to be desired, he's the only one who doesn't depend on desire to exist. Seduction, at its core, is a mirror of society. Both are based on appearances, influence games, and exchanges of symbolic power. Machiavelli warned that every ruler must appear virtuous, even when acting with calculation. The same applies to love. It's the appearance of virtue that enchants, but it's domination that captivates. A woman, consciously or not, seeks a man who can navigate between these two poles. One who inspires trust without losing his mystery. One who offers warmth without giving up his castle. Love, therefore, is not just emotion, it is the geopolitics of the soul. And those who understand this cease to be gamblers and become strategists. In the end, it all comes down to a truth that no one likes to face. Love, like power, does not belong to those who feel it most, but to those who best understand the game. Machiavelli knew that whoever controls their own emotions controls others without needing force. And that's why the emotionally centered man doesn't fear losing. He chooses when to stay. He does not beg. He does not force. He does not plead. He observes, understands, and decides. The man who understands real human nature realizes that attraction is not a miracle. It is a biological response to presence, dominance, and calm. She feels when he is the center. and everything around her organizes itself around that. The good guy seeks approval. The strategist, respect. And respect is the foundation of every lasting passion. So the question is, have you been behaving like the man who inspires emotion, or like the one who begs for love? Are you leading your own emotional game, or are you still a pawn on someone else's board? Because in the end, love is just another field of power, and those who don't understand that always end up being ruled. If something in this video opened your mind, or poked at what you'd rather not see, then the journey has begun. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here we don't talk about romance. We talk about the psychology of power.